Good afternoon. It's been a couple weeks since I did my video about the 200th anniversary of the first Latin American novel ever published, El Periquillo Sarmiento, Spanish for the Mangy Little Parrot, written by Joaquin Fernandez de Lizardi. I just didn't think I could improve on that, but last night I was reading the book that I kind of quoted from towards the end of my video, and I found some stuff that I thought were really interesting about the end of his life, the end of Fernandez de Lizardi's life. That was the book written by Professor Jefferson Rea Spell in 1931, who ultimately went to teach at the University of Texas his last years. Anyway, what I have to read to you today or share with you is really about the end of his life. So I think I'll start first. I think I like to start with the best. And then, not to say that what comes after what I'm going to read to you isn't as good, but this is something that I think would catch people's attention the most. So I like to begin with something that'll catch people's attention the most and then work my way down. Okay, so this is after Fernandez de Lizardi dies. He died of tuberculosis in June 1827. He was not quite 51. Thus passed from the life of Mexico City a figure pathetic in its simplicity and loneliness, yet commanding the attention of all and the respect of few. Criticized, misjudged, abused, underpaid, and unappreciated, Lizardi did the work of a pioneer. He blazed a trail in order that others might follow. With all the power at his command, he devoted himself to attempting to With all the power at his command, he devoted himself to attempting to arouse his countrymen from their lethargy. In return, he earned for himself only the hatred of the privileged classes and the contempt of the ignorant. In order that his compatriots might see themselves as others saw them, he pictured them as they were, ignorant and indifferent, intolerant and unjust, blind to their own interest and to that of others. In him they saw only a quarrelsome mentor, dissatisfied with everything about him. Yet when death beckoned and he laid down his pen for the last time, he could honestly say, as his whole career passed in dim review before his fading vision, that in spite of poverty, derision, and physical suffering, he had done to the utmost lo que pudo por su patria, which means what he could do for his country. So he sure made a lot of enemies in his writings, especially the pamphlets, which I would more call like essays. He was right on the doorstep of when Mexico became independent from Spain, and for much of his life, Mexico was a colony of Mother Spain. And Mexico was independent the last few years of his life. But he also made a great enemy of the church. Even after Mexico became independent, the church, at least some people in the church who had power, were kind of still aligning with Spain. And I think we're even asking soldiers to betray the new independent country and do something in favor of Spain to undermine the newly independent country. But he had all other reasons why he picked quarrels with the church. Mostly, I guess, what he thought was hypocrisy or abuse of power. But he swore that he was a very faithful Catholic and he believed in God. It's just he wasn't very happy with the people who were at the helm of the church sometimes. So let's talk about towards the very end of his life. I'm going to skip around a little bit because I don't know that you need to hear all of this. Tuberculosis, of which he was a victim, was already bringing his working days fast to a close. Yet even in the face of this disease, he was an unconquerable spirit. In defiance of his enemies who continued to insist that he was a heretic, he published on January 6, 1827, his Dudas del Pensador acerca del Catecismo de Ripalda. So that's doubts of well, he called himself El Pensador, the thinker, about the Catechism of Ripalda. And I guess there he kind of defended himself again. I'm not a heretic. I just disagree with some of what's going on in the church. By the latter part of April 1827, Lizardi had become so emaciated as to appear merely a living skeleton, a condition which greatly rejoiced his enemies. Realizing that the day of his death was rapidly approaching, he still clung desperately to his pen in order to leave in permanent form his last views and wishes. And in this, which I'm not going to read, he again defended himself as not being a heretic. And I guess he was very much for religious freedom. That was another thing. And without looking through the whole thing, I'm sure he probably talked somewhere here about how he wanted the best for the new nation, and mentioned about just how corrupt a lot of the way Mexico was being handled was. He also, I don't believe it was in this essay, but he gave instructions to his wife and his family about exactly how he wanted his funeral to go. He wanted an epitaph put on his tombstone, and there was very little of what he requested for his last wishes, for his burial, his funeral, that were paid attention to. He got very little of what he wanted, which was unfortunate. Extreme poverty robbed his last days of even such comforts as might have relieved his physical suffering, and forced upon him continually the bitter realization that he was leaving his family in want. He made his final confession to 2 priests, but postponed receiving the viaticum in order that his friends who believed him a heretic might witness the act. But the plans miscarried. On June 27, 1827, a miserable dwelling at number 27 de la Calle de Puente Quebrado, the brave spirit took its flight before the friends arrived. To satisfy the fanatics who insisted that he had died possessed of the devil, his body was exposed to the gaze of the public. Among those who took part in the death watch were Pablo Villavicencio, his loyal friend, and Jose Maria Asa, who had been his mortal enemy. On the following day, the body accompanied by a small group who respected him, the body was accompanied by a small group who respected him, and a mob of curious busybodies borne to the cemetery of San Lázaro and consigned to the grave with the military honors due a retired captain. Neither was the epitaph he desired inscribed on a stone, nor other attention paid to his last resting place. The cemetery was for a while neglected, then forgotten. In time it became the site of a pigsty. How sad. All trace of the spot in which El Pensador Mexicano was buried has long since been lost. The faithful wife who had shared his few joys and many sorrows did not long survive him. 4 months later, she passed away and was buried in the same cemetery. The daughter, then only 15, I thought I read she was 14, but the daughter, then only 15, was left to the care of a lady named Doña Juliana Guevara de Ceballos. Later, the girl became a member of another family which moved to Veracruz, and there the last survivor of the family of the Pensador died of yellow fever. And there was an author, Manuel Pinault, who wrote, I believe it was a short story in 1843, and he just kind of managed to squeeze in there, although I don't think it had too much to do with his short story, that he visited her grave. And he mentioned that here lies the remains of the daughter of Fernandez de Lizardi. So that's about it. I know it's not incredibly profound, but I thought it'd be definitely a nice addition to what we had already talked about. And by the way, as I explained in part one, in the kind of the description of the video, I was about 6 years late in commemorating the 200th anniversary of this novel, because it was 1816. This is now 2022. I looked for a while, as I think I mentioned in part one, and I just didn't find anybody who really did a really great 200th anniversary tribute to him. So just one day I decided, well, why not do it? So I hope you enjoyed my video and have a good day. Bye.